Since the beginning of recorded time, mankind has seen unidentified flying objects in the sky. Have extraterrestrials influenced the course of human events? Confront the specter that has haunted our collective imagination throughout history. For thousands of years, we have gazed in awe at the night sky. In watching their slow yet relentless movement across the heavens, people discovered that the changing pattern of the stars precisely matched the ebb and flow of seasons. This allowed for the development of the calendar and the rise of agriculture. But some objects in the sky followed neither pattern nor orderly path, seeming to defy the natural laws that bind all things. These unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, challenged human understanding, provoking a quest that continues to this day.
You'd have to say that UFO evidence goes back as far as man has left any records at all, because even in ancient cave art 20,000 years ago or so in France and Spain, there are objects, drawings that look like modern flying saucers. So you'd have to go back that far if you wanted to start some point in time when the first UFO report was recorded.
Forever frozen in silence and in stone, these provocative drawings raise questions which are debated to this day. For some, these shapes represent gods or ancestral spirits. But for others, they are ancient depictions of spacecraft, ancient aliens. Texts from the world's earliest civilizations, including Sumeria some 5,000 years ago, mention strange aerial phenomena and the beings who controlled them.
There are ancient records in which people describe different kinds of flying objects which they have seen. In some cases, the people were describing what they understood to be flying vehicles piloted by various categories of living beings. There are written accounts which describe this in great detail.
The images are provocative and controversial.
A lot relates to how you interpret the signs that we see. Is a sketch on the wall an alien in a space helmet? Is it a diving helmet? Or is it just a decorative piece of work from a science fiction writer of several thousand years ago? So the further back you go, the harder it is to interpret.
Despite increasing public support for the notion that UFOs may have been visiting the Earth since the dawn of history, the scientific community is overwhelmingly skeptical about the subject.
Ancient people saw weird things in the sky, and they were convinced that these were symbols of God's intentions. Their lives were controlled by the gods. And in every case that I am aware of, there is an alternate explanation. It could have been a meteor, which they didn't understand. It could have been some ball lightning. It could have been any kind of thing that was just totally unknown to primitive man, and so they always interpret these things in terms of supernatural.
Despite scientific skepticism, the annals of human affairs contain many curious examples of strange objects seen in the sky. One of the earliest written records of an encounter with a UFO comes from Egypt, more than 3,500 years ago.
There's a story about Thutmose III, Egyptian pharaoh, who saw circles of fire in the sky and started off with one, and then the report says that there were, a few days later, there were many of them in the sky.
And he was so impressed that this was recorded on a papyrus and considered very momentous.
In the year 22 of the third month of the winter, a circle of fire appeared in the sky. After some days, it became more numerous and shone with the brightness of the sun, extending to the very limits of the heavens. The records of Pharaoh Thutmose, 1480 BCE.
Centuries later, during his invasion of Asia, the mighty Greek leader Alexander the Great is chronicled as having witnessed UFOs. While crossing a river in 329 BC, Alexander and his men observe what are described as gleaming silver shields in the sky. The objects repeatedly swoop down on the column of soldiers, scattering men and horses in panic. 7 years later, while attacking the Phoenician city of Tyre in the eastern Mediterranean, Alexander again encounters UFOs. Recorded by observers on both sides of the conflict, one of the objects suddenly shoots a beam of light at the city wall, which crumbles into dust, allowing Alexander and his troops to easily breach the defenses and take the city. The passage of centuries leaves us with little proof of whether the events really took place, or were merely the products of fertile and imaginative minds.
Remember, the working hypothesis for historians for hundreds of years has always been that mankind is alone, that there are no intruders from outer space, that there were no advanced civilizations, that our civilization, and each generation thinks this, is at the peak. We're it. Well, unless you throw out those assumptions, there's no way you're going to get at the truth of these old accounts.
Many of the accounts are mystifying indeed. Medieval Europe was the scene of a mysterious incident in 1463 when a strange slab-like object reportedly appeared in the sky. Surrounded by flames and a bright light, it glided eerily above the landscape. This drawing was made by Hermann Schaden, a witness to the event. A century later, another witness recorded this unearthly occurrence above the skies of Nuremberg, Germany. On the morning of April 14, 1561, huge round cylinders were said to have appeared above the city. Smaller circular objects emerged from them, appearing to engage in battle with one another. 5 years later, a similar display was reported above Basel, Switzerland. This time, many of the objects attacked one another, were consumed by fire, and then vanished without trace. Once again, the encounter was documented by a local witness. By the early 19th century, the world seemed to be resonating to the mysterious presence of unidentified flying objects. Countless theories were proposed as to what they were and where they came from.
A lot of the ancient stories about UFOs are really stories about angels and leprechauns and things of that sort, which existed in the mythology of the time. They're, I think, a product of the very powerful fantasy ability of the mind. After all, everyone dreams.
The subject of UFOs is a sensitive one, with supporters on opposing sides of an ongoing debate.
We have today an enormous body of evidence of people seeing consistently reported beings in terms of their shape, their size, little details that indicate a phenomenon is going on where those beings are associated with spacecraft, flying saucers, call them what you want. So I think as an explanation, oh, people are just seeing the same leprechauns that they saw before, is a foolish explanation. Maybe the people back then were seeing the same little gray guys that are coming here now.
For centuries, scholars have grappled with the question of what UFOs may be, the possible identity of their occupants, and where they may have come from. Unfortunately, answers are hard to find. When we return, we look to an unlikely source for the answers. Some of the earliest accounts of UFOs ever recorded may be contained within the pages of the Holy Bible. The saga of events that once played out against the landscape of the Middle East is enshrined in the Western world's most revered book, the Holy Bible. In recent years, the Bible has been increasingly touted by some investigators as a collection of stories describing encounters with aliens and UFOs. But the topic is controversial. Can the sacred nature of the biblical texts be challenged?
With the decline of religion that has been experienced by a great many people, I think people are looking for an alternative that is more scientific. And so the possibility of life is one that has been suggested by scientists. So the next best thing to having a supernatural intervention in our world is to have UFOs visiting us from another civilization. So I think there's a certain would-be religious urge that has moved in the direction of supporting UFOs.
The search for humanity's first possible contact with alien beings in prehistoric times leads to an unlikely place, to the Bible's earliest chapters, to the book of Genesis. Genesis describes conditions in the world at the dawn of time.
There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Genesis 6:4.
Exactly who were the giants in the earth and the sons of God mentioned in the text? While most English Bibles use the word giants, the original Hebrew word is Nephilim.
One translation of the word Nephilim is the men who came down, or those who came down, meaning those who came down from the sky. So it may not mean necessarily that they're physical giants. They could just be something like great heroes that came down from the sky and produced a hybrid race.
For many investigators hoping to unlock the mystery of UFOs in the ancient world, the Bible contains other intriguing clues.
The Bible is full of UFO references that can be interpreted as such, and they were very well recorded. One of the best examples of classic UFO story is the story of Moses.
3,500 years ago, an epic period in biblical history begins when Israelite slaves are finally released from bondage in Egypt. Under the leadership of Moses, they begin a 40-year trek through the wilderness, en route to the Promised Land. But according to the Bible, something very mysterious guides the multitude through the barren desert.
The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. Exodus 14:21.
Some believe the biblical passage contains another dimension to the meaning long cherished by most Christians and Jews.
Some people interpret the pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire that Moses followed through the wilderness as being similar to a cigar-shaped UFO. It expresses a theme of an extraterrestrial intelligence. some sort of advanced form of life and intelligence that's guiding man, something that's higher than man.
Some of the most intriguing biblical passages concern Mount Sinai and the handing down of the Ten Commandments.
Mount Sinai was covered in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke ascended as the smoke in a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked loudly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded and waxed louder, Moses spake, and God answered. Exodus 19:18.
When Moses returns with the Ten Commandments after his encounter with God or Jehovah on Mount Sinai, his skin mysteriously shines with an unearthly glow. His hair has turned snow white.
The story of Moses has been tied in with an extraterrestrial encounter. His hair was turned white, which some have linked with the possibility of radiation exposure and so forth. It's easy to see how this could be regarded as a classic UFO encounter.
The notion that the Israelites may have been led to the Promised Land by some form of extraterrestrial entity has attracted many adherents in the last few decades. But understandably, scientists and religious leaders fiercely challenge the idea.
We're dealing very much with an interpretation, and we're dealing with an issue that I think has potential for being highly controversial, because after all, if you say that Jehovah is an ET, then that changes the basis of Judaism and Christianity in a very fundamental way. But it is a question of interpretation.
It's so easy to speculate. You can look at almost any story and find something that could have been signs of an extraterrestrial. But what you have to do, if you want to have such an incredible explanation, you have to have very strong proof. Otherwise, you're just gullible.
Hints at possible biblical connections with extraterrestrials or UFOs are not confined to the book of Exodus. In the second book of Kings, there is the intriguing story of the prophet Elijah, who lived around 900 years before the time of Jesus. While Elijah crosses the river Jordan with his son Elisha, a strange airborne craft appears.
And it came to pass as they went on and talked that, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind unto heaven. And Elisha saw it and cried, and saw his father no more. 2 Kings 2:11.
In all ancient cultures, you will have descriptions of flying chariots of different kinds. For example, a chariot drawn by horses that flies through the sky and so on. In many cases, people today will interpret these as UFOs, that is, some kind of vehicle that flies under its own power.
Just over 3 centuries after Elijah's ascent into heaven in a chariot of fire, another strange incident occurs. This time it concerns the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel. He is believed by some to have encountered alien spaceships on at least 4 separate occasions. In one account, he describes a clearly mechanical device under the control of human-like figures.
I saw 4 wheels, one wheel beside each cherub. In appearance they were like sparkling topaz, and all 4 were alike, like a wheel within a wheel. They moved in any 4 directions, never swerving from their course. Ezekiel 10:8.
Based on the biblical description of the strange flying device, in the 1960s, NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich constructed this model. Is this what Ezekiel saw?
I don't know what Ezekiel saw, if he saw anything. One possibility is he was dreaming. Another possibility, he had some hallucinogenic mushroom or something of that sort. Another possibility is that he met another tribe that might have had torches and masks that were very frightening to him, and he just saw something otherworldly that he couldn't explain, and so he made up this story that explained it as best as he could with the terms that he understood in his time.
Despite the ambiguity of biblical accounts, other records from prehistory have intensified the debate. Some could be interpreted to suggest that UFOs and extraterrestrials have influenced pivotal events in human history. When we come back, possible evidence of alien encounters at the dawn of civilization. Artifacts discovered throughout the Near East speak of a time when humanity's ancestors came to Earth from the heavens. Hundreds of clay tablets and cylinder seals depict human-like beings with wings, linking them with the sky, and always conspicuous, the stars.
If you look at the ancient history of the Near East and consider the Sumerians and Babylonians, you'll find that these peoples believed that their civilization was given to them by beings who came down from the heavens.
There's nothing in the historical record that is really conclusive. There are some intriguing stories in the records of Babylon, for example, but the human mind is so easily able to invent myths and fantasies that we have to take these ancient stories with a grain of salt.
Yet archaeologists have often pondered on the exact process which led to civilization as we know it. For it was with the suddenness of a sunrise that human ingenuity and engineering skills arose from the Stone Age and burst forth onto the landscape of history. The Sphinx and the Great Pyramid at Giza are two of the greatest enigmas of all time. The exact dates of their construction are still cause for debate. How these ancient people developed the technology to build the Great Pyramid with a discipline and precision still unmatched today is unknown.
The Great Pyramid of Egypt stands more than 450 feet tall. It weighs more than 6 million tons, and it has a footprint in excess of 13 acres. It's perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west. To achieve that precision of alignment with a monument on this scale is an extraordinary technological feat, and one that is continuously overlooked by our scholars today. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this extraordinary monument, a high-tech achievement by any standards, just appears on the desert. This is a great mystery, totally unexplained by conventional history, and one that requires us to use our minds and our imagination and intelligence to try to work out what on earth is going on here and what it says about the origins of human civilization, of the origins of our society, and our view of the past and where we came from. My sense is that we're missing a huge part of the human story. I think it's possible, indeed probable, that we are a species with amnesia, that we've lost the record of our story going back thousands of years before so-called history began. And I think if we could go back into that dark epoch, we would discover many astounding things about ourselves.
Egypt and the Near East are not the only regions where ancient ruins taunt the mind with the riddle of how they came into being. There are many such places. This is one of them, the great ceremonial center known as Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. Not as old or as imposing as the pyramids of Egypt, What makes this site so unusual is its unique location. Some believe that it too could not have been built without intervention from a superior source.
The biggest blocks at Giza weigh 200 tons. The biggest blocks at Tiwanaku weigh 400 tons. 400-ton blocks of stone used to create enormous constructions, 12,500 feet above sea level, in an area where it's almost not possible to grow any food today. The altitude is so high that the crops come out of the ground stunted. And yet again, we're asked to believe that this was done with massive labor forces hauling on ropes, pulling these blocks along. It defies belief to imagine that this was how it was done. You could not support ever a large labor force at that altitude. Whether we like it or not, we're looking at the evidence of a technology, and one that we don't understand. Like the Giza site, the site of Tiwanaku also incorporates extremely precise astronomical alignments.
Site of all in South America are the Nazca Lines in Peru. Covering more than 200 square miles, a bewildering pattern of gigantic artwork litters the Nazca Plateau. In addition to figures of birds, spiders, and animals, arrow-straight lines stretch out to every point of the compass. Believed to have been laid down here more than 2,000 years ago, they are observable only from a great height. Is this a canvas of signs and symbols etched in the sand to honor pagan gods? Or, as some people believe, do they contain hidden messages aimed at ancient travelers from the stars?
These are very remarkable sculptures made by essentially moving pebbles so as to change the color tone of the desert surface. It appears that many of these patterns of lines seem as though they're oriented towards the heavens in some way. We really don't know what they were for or or how they were interpreted by the people who made them.
I think that this may be one explanation, that the Nazcans were projecting these into the sky and using them for religious and ceremonial purposes. But the Nazca lines really do constitute a mystery. No one really knows what they were for.
Like so much of the ancient world, Nazca broods silently, its secrets lost in time. When we return, thousands of miles away on the other side of the planet, evidence that UFOs may have visited Asia in a far-gone era. Asia, ageless land of 1,000 legends. It is also a continent of intriguing riddles. During the 1920s, while exploring northern China, famous Russian artist Nicholas Roerich wrote of a remarkable incident in the Himalayas.
On August 5th, we were in our camp, and at about 9:30, some of our caravanners noticed a huge shining oval shape flying high overhead. It came from the north at great speed, crossing our camp before disappearing into the clear blue sky. It had a bright, luminous surface, brilliant in the sun. Nicholas Roerich, Travel Diary, 1926.
In the long history of this vast and beautiful continent, it seems that the UFO phenomenon has shaped many myths and stories handed down from generation to generation. A brief glance at the texts of ancient India is revealing, for here too we find the haunting presence of strange phenomena observed in the sky.
Gurkha, flying a swift and powerful Vimana, hurled a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns, rose with all its splendor. The Mahabharata.
Compiled some 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, the Mahabharata is a Hindu poem written in Sanskrit. 10 times longer than Homer's Iliad and Odyssey combined, it is a saga of conflict on a cosmic scale.
The plot of the Mahabharata, which is the great epic of ancient India, has to do with an invasion of the Earth by negative extraterrestrial forces. Basically, the idea was that governments of the Earth were taken over by beings coming from other planets who had the desire to control and exploit the situation for their own personal benefit. The story goes on to describe how godly forces intervened, and finally there was a great battle here on the Earth in which the issue was resolved and the negative forces were repelled.
Another epic poem, the Ramayana, was written more than 2,000 years ago. It too tells of conflict and conflagration in India's distant past.
The Vimana was a weapon so powerful that it could destroy the earth in an instant. It made a great soaring sound in smoke and flames, and on it sits death, the Ramayana.
Prominently featured in all these stories are strange flying devices referred to as Vimanas. Could they have been UFOs?
The Vimana is described in some detail, and its flight pattern is also described. It's quite interesting because it is very similar to the pattern of flight which is described in the context of modern UFO sightings. For example, the Vimana would move in a very abrupt zigzag fashion. It would sometimes disappear from sight.
The earth shook, scorched by the terrible violent heat of this weapon. Elephants burst into flame and ran to and fro in frenzy. Over a vast area, other animals crumpled to the ground and died. From all directions, the arrows of flame rained continuously and fiercely from the Vimanas. The Mahabharata.
They were described as flying fortresses that were used for aerial battles. They also attacked people on the ground. They sent out missiles, according to these translations, interpretations. Sort of like a modern UFO report, except a war was taking place.
Could great aerial battles have been possible more than 2,000 years ago? Compelling though the stories may be, the debate continues over whether they were fact or fantasy.
I think the ancient Hindu descriptions of flying machines are probably fantasies, sort of like the Buck Rogers myths of flying rocket ships long before they really existed.
The easy way out is mythology, old science fiction, if you will. The realistic way is to say that those people were describing things that they didn't understand, but that were real. What we need is an open-minded effort to look at these things from the viewpoint of modern technology, possibly admitting that even we can't do some of the things that are described.
Asia would not be the last place where UFO phenomenon occurred. When we return, a spate of sightings appears throughout the four corners of the modern world and causes a sensation. While many believe that the Earth has been visited by extraterrestrials in their spacecraft, could this indeed be possible? Reports of strange, unidentified flying objects have continued to trickle in throughout the centuries, echoing incidents in ancient times. By the 1940s, the term flying saucer had entered the vocabulary of a fascinated world. Suddenly, seemingly everywhere, the skies were filled with UFOs of every description. In the ensuing decades, UFOs were witnessed by people from all levels of society. Even astronauts saw them.
I personally believe in UFOs, and I believed in UFOs before I got into the space program. I just personally believe that there are other civilizations somewhere out there that people are traveling from. This was in the early 1950s when I was flying fighters in Germany. And these objects were coming over our base that appeared to be the same kind of formations that we fly in our fighters. On occasion, their movements were more erratic than ours, which meant they could really accelerate laterally and accelerate fore and aft more readily than we do. But we felt that they looked very much like high-flying fighters, except they had no wings. They were certainly higher and faster than any airplanes we know of here on Earth at that particular time, and they certainly appeared to be saucer-shaped and metallic.
Why are UFOs so seemingly secretive and elusive? If extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth, some believe that this question only can be answered by direct face-to-face contact with them. In 1977, NASA sent two robotic Voyager spacecraft on an ambitious exploratory tour to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, the four giant outer planets. Their epic journey took 12 years to complete, but they acquired more scientific data about our solar system than had been learned in the previous 5 centuries. Could this be the UFO's mission to planet Earth? To explore our world on behalf of another technologically advanced civilization somewhere in the far-flung reaches of the cosmos? While we now know that the chances of finding intelligent life in our solar system are extremely unlikely, our sun is but one of billions in our galaxy, and the galaxy itself is but one of countless galaxies spread throughout the universe. With these odds, can we be alone? In August 1996, scientists announced that life might have once existed on Mars. Just a few months earlier, the first planet orbiting another sun was confirmed. Though 8 light-years, or a staggering 50 trillion miles from Earth, on the cosmic scale, that is literally just down the road from our own backyard.
Today, we know a lot about the universe, and we know there really is a possibility that there could be life out there. But most of what you hear about it is nonsense, because people accept the most bizarre stories without proof. And there are many stories from all over the world of people seeing strange lights in the sky. Some of them are true. There are strange lights in the sky, but they usually have an explanation. There are all kinds of things going on around us, and the average person doesn't know about this, and they see something weird, and they say, wow, it must be extraterrestrial. So there's a tremendous amount of gullibility all over the world.
We live on a planet revolving around a star in the middle of an unknown infinity of space. Isn't it arrogant and stupid to imagine that we're the only life in this enormous universe? If you take our ancient texts seriously, they all tell us that the universe was created as a home for life, that the universe is full of life. I think it's obvious that there are many other intelligent life forms in the universe, and I don't dismiss for a moment the possibility that they have visited Earth, perhaps in the past, perhaps even now.
Despite the vast distances and technical difficulties involved in space travel, it is possible that an advanced civilization has visited our small blue planet sometime in its forgotten past. It is also possible that they brought with them a message from the stars that still lies buried beneath these ruins.
This summer, best friends became enemies.
He hung up on me. That's how mad he is. He laughed at me like it's a joke.
Now, with the truckers all in the same room, are Rick and Hugh gonna have it out? It's a clash of the truckers, and it won't be pretty. Ice Road Truckers, On the Edge, concludes Sunday at 9, only on the History Channel.